When Hannah was a sophomore in college, she fell in love with a mysterious man. Later, she found out that he was a werewolf. Not long after, she unexpectedly became pregnant. To avoid unnecessary trouble, Hannah decided to teach herself everything about pregnancy and childbirth at home. Her husband would often go hunting in the wild to bring back nutritious food for her. Fortunately, everything went smoothly, and Hannah eventually gave birth to a werewolf boy and girl. She thought the four of them could finally live a happy life together, but that happiness didn't last long. One day, her husband died unexpectedly, and his lifeless body was heartlessly tossed onto a garbage truck. No matter how loudly Hannah cried out in the pouring rain, she never got the chance to say goodbye to him. Staring at the photo on his driver's license, Hannah made up her mind to raise the children on her own. But raising 2 children alone was no easy task for a young college student. Hannah had no experience with parenting, and her children weren't like normal human babies, so she couldn't even talk to other mothers about it. She could only rely on books to learn how to be a mom. When the kids got sick, she didn't know whether to take them to a pediatric clinic or an animal hospital. With no other choice, she called a doctor for advice. Luckily, it turned out the kids had only eaten some silica gel by accident, and they were fine. Thanks to the money her husband had left behind, Hannah's family could still live relatively peacefully. But as time went by, the differences in her children became more noticeable. Their werewolf traits grew stronger and stronger. They even started chewing up the furniture all the time. This left Hannah feeling more helpless than ever, and caring for both children left her completely exhausted. She would fall asleep instantly during short breaks, and the chronic sleep deprivation made her look worn out. One day, her daughter Snow was desperate to go out for a walk. With no other option, Hannah took both kids to the park, dressing them in hooded clothes so they wouldn't draw attention. But on the way back, Snow got into a scuffle with a stranger's pet dog. The scene shocked Hannah, and she hurriedly took her children and left. From that day on, she never dared take the kids out in public again. But at night, the children would howl like wolves, which led to complaints from their neighbors. Since pets weren't allowed in the apartment, the landlord told her they'd have to move out if the issue wasn't resolved. After thinking long and hard, Hannah decided to move. After all, werewolves couldn't truly blend into human society. One bright morning, the family moved to the countryside. On the way there, the real estate agent kept trying to talk Hannah out of it, urging her to think twice because life in the countryside would be full of difficulties. But Hannah had made up her mind to give her kids a better environment. Soon they arrived at a rundown old house. Though it was in bad shape, it had working water and electricity. They could even grow their own vegetables to live off the land. Most importantly, there were no other residents for hundreds of meters around. Snow loved it there. Life in the countryside made her excited and full of energy. But Rain was the complete opposite. He was terrified of all the bugs and just wanted to go back to their old home. Seeing this, Hannah quickly tried to comfort her son. The old house had all the tools they needed, but cleaning it up was far from easy. The floors collapsed with a single step, and the ceiling crumbled at the lightest push. What bothered Hannah most was how badly the roof leaked on rainy days. Thankfully, Hannah was incredibly handy, and under her care, the rundown house started to look like a real home. As time went on, Hannah's savings started to run low, so she decided to grow her own vegetables. She bought lots of books about gardening from the bookstore, and during this time she also told her children stories about werewolves. The stories were about 2 werewolf children. Whenever they transformed into wolves, they would scare all the other kids away. Hannah used these stories to teach her children. She told them never to turn into wolves in front of others. For the kids, storytelling was far more effective than strict warnings. Soon they began planting vegetables, but simply following the instructions in books ended in failure. So Hannah had to start all over again. Right then, Rain came crying to her, with scratch marks on his face from a raccoon. Hannah had to take care of his wound first. Snow then mocked his little brother for being too timid and getting bullied. After this incident, Hannah gave it a lot of thought. She realized that raising them like human children might not work. At that moment, she regretted never asking her husband more about how to raise werewolf kids. So she started studying wolf behavior, and she even took her children into the mountains to hunt. To her surprise, Snow was already a natural. She raced effortlessly through the forest and even managed to catch small animals with ease. Rain, on the other hand, was completely different. Ever since they entered the forest, he had felt uncomfortable and eventually sat under a tree and began to cry. He didn't understand why wolves in fairy tales were always the villains, always hunted and killed by humans. But Snow told him she really liked wolves, and she saw them as friends. Their mother's words made Rain see things in a new light. But when they got home, they found that all their crops had withered. An elderly man named Nirasaki, who had been watching over Hana for some time, finally decided to lend her a hand. The next day, following Nirasaki's instructions, Hana retilled all the soil. Days passed one after another, and Hana was exhausted every single day. But she never dared to slack off. Luckily, her hard work finally paid off. Soon, 2 more neighbors came by. They took Hana to pick out vegetable seedlings and guided her step by step on how to plant them. As time went on, more and more neighbors came to visit. They were deeply impressed that Hana had managed to persevere. Most young people wouldn't choose to return to the countryside to live. Their kindness gave Hana a warmth she had never felt before. Harvest season arrived before long, and Hana's efforts finally bore fruit. To express her gratitude, she brought freshly harvested potatoes to visit her neighbors. But everyone was complaining that their own potatoes had been ruined by wild animals. In the middle of the conversation, everyone realized that Hana's potatoes were the only ones untouched by animals. So they asked her what her secret was. Hana simply smiled in response, but deep down she suspected that snow might have had something to do with it. All the neighbors looked out for this single mother. When they saw that her refrigerator was too small, they brought her a larger one the very next day. Though Nirasaki wasn't good at expressing himself and had a bit of a temper, he was the one who helped Hana the most. That night, Hana looked back on the years, and despite the hardships, her home had finally become a true home. Winter soon arrived, and thick snow covered the ground. The 3 of them jumped into it and played without a care. Later, they headed into the wild. Snow and rain completely let loose, sprinting across the snowy fields with wild joy. Since becoming a mother, Hana had never felt this happy. Eventually, the 3 of them collapsed into the snow, completely worn out. But as they were leaving, Rain was drawn to a bird by the riverbank. Acting on his wolf instincts, he grabbed the bird, but slipped and fell into the icy river. In the freezing water, he cried out for his mother. But his strength quickly gave out, and he sank beneath the surface. Hana heard his cries in the distance and rushed over as fast as she could. Thankfully, at the last moment, Snow managed to pull him out of the water. Seeing Rain lying motionless on the ground, Hana panicked and held him tightly in her arms. Fortunately, Rain came to and began telling her about the hunt he'd just been on. But Hana was already in tears. This was the first time Snow had ever seen her cry. Hana didn't say a word. She just held her 2 children tightly in her arms. It was also the first time she had ever felt such overwhelming fear. Winter passed and spring arrived, marking the beginning of a new year. Snow had reached the age where she should start going to school. But Hana didn't want her to be exposed to human society. However, after much pleading from Snow, Hana finally agreed to let her attend school, on the condition that she never transformed into her werewolf form in front of others. Along the way, Snow skipped and hopped excitedly, but once she arrived at school, she felt out of place. She had never seen so many people in her life. Hana stood in the background, cheering her on. Thankfully, Snow adapted quickly and became good friends with her classmates within just a few days. Meanwhile, Rain followed his mother into the forest every day. He wanted to learn more about how wolves lived. To support him, Hana applied for a job at the zoo. With the help of a co-worker, they got to meet a real wolf. Hana asked the wolf how young wolves grew up, but received no response. Still, she wasn't about to give up. She planned to keep working while learning about nature and its rhythms, so she could share that knowledge with her son. As time passed, Snow's time at school became more difficult. She liked wrapping snakes around her hands and collecting animal bones and carcasses. Even though she meant no harm, the other students just couldn't handle it. Back home, Snow told her mother about it, and Hana couldn't help but laugh. That night, Hana stayed up sewing a little dress for her, hoping it would help her blend in better at school. Soon, Rain was also old enough to go to school, but he was completely different from Snow. His introverted personality made it hard for him to make friends, and he was often bullied by older kids. Every time it was Snow who stood up for him. Time flew by. Rain quickly reached the 3rd grade, and Snow had grown quite a bit taller. But Rain, who struggled academically, often skipped class. He would always go find that aging wolf and frequently wandered off alone on outdoor adventures. One day, a new boy named Fuji transferred into Snow's class. Fuji was very intrigued by Snow. He said he could smell an animal scent coming from her. From then on, Snow started acting like a completely different person. She deliberately avoided Fuji. Fuji was confused. Other classmates told him that Snow used to be very cheerful. Fuji figured he must have done something wrong and tried to talk to Snow about it. But Snow didn't want to see him. Eventually, Fuji's persistence led to a confrontation. In a moment of panic, Snow knocked him to the ground. She couldn't suppress it any longer. She transformed into a werewolf. The school quickly called in both sets of parents. Fuji had a scratch on his ear, but Snow remained silent. Hana urged Snow to apologize, but Fuji's mother was aggressive and refused to let the matter go, creating a tense atmosphere. Just then, Fuji suddenly spoke up, saying it wasn't Snow who hurt him, it was the wolf. Hearing that from Fuji, his mother decided to drop the matter. After school, Snow felt wronged and cried loudly in the car. Hana could only hold her tightly in her arms. But when they got home, they saw that Fuji had left behind some study materials and then quickly ran away. In the days that followed, Fuji kept dropping things off. But strangely, the two of them always seemed to avoid seeing each other. Until one day, when Hana took the chance while Snow was out to invite Fuji into their home. She even brought up the incident where Snow had hurt him, but Fuji insisted that the wound had been caused by the wolf. Hana was grateful for what he'd done, and curiously asked if he hated wolves. Fuji immediately said no. The next morning, just as Snow was about to head to school, she saw Fuji standing at the door. He had come to make peace, even showing the still healing scar on his ear. Feeling guilty, Snow happily accepted his gesture. Under Hana's watchful gaze, the two made up. At that moment, Rain was also preparing to go out. He said he was going to visit his teacher, but the direction he headed wasn't toward the school. Curious, Hana decided to follow him. Turns out Rain's teacher wasn't human, but an old fox. The fox was also the guardian of the forest. Under the fox's guidance, Rain had learned many survival skills. He had also witnessed natural wonders he'd never seen before. For a moment, Hana felt like he had grown up, like he had developed a unique understanding of the natural world. He even invited Snow to join him in the forest and learn these skills. But Snow believed that they were humans and should go to school instead. The two of them disagreed and started to argue. Their argument escalated into a physical fight in their werewolf forms. They didn't stop until both were covered in scratches and bruises. Hana looked at a photo of her late husband. She didn't know what to do, because both of their choices were right. In the days that followed, Rain ventured into the mountains more and more often. He told Hana that the old fox had been injured and didn't have much time left. He wanted to take over the role of guardian of the forest, but Hana opposed the idea. The next day, Rain pleaded with his sister to stay home and take care of Hana. But Snow didn't take it seriously and headed off to school. The Weather Bureau reported that a major storm was expected over the next few days, so Hana and Rain began preparing in advance. Meanwhile, the school cancelled afternoon classes and all the students waited for their parents to pick them up. After receiving a call from the school, Hana prepared to go pick up Snow. But at that moment, Rain had already left the house. With no other option, Hana went to the mountains to search for her son first. She looked in many places but couldn't find him. Suddenly, there was movement up ahead and she rushed toward the sound. But instead of Rain, she came face to face with a massive brown bear. Hana froze in fear. Fortunately, the bear didn't harm her. It simply left quietly with its cub. She continued deeper into the forest, but the rain-soaked ground was extremely slippery. Combined with her fatigue from walking so long, Hana lost her footing and tumbled down a slope. She eventually passed out on the forest floor. At school, only Snow and Fuji were left waiting. The storm outside made Snow feel uneasy. But what puzzled her even more was why Fuji's mother hadn't come to get him. Fuji finally opened up about his family. His mother had remarried and was now pregnant. Fuji believed that once the baby was born, she would abandon him. Snow suddenly felt a sense of sympathy, but Fuji didn't seem to care. He thought he could live just fine on his own. She admired his confidence and the way he spoke his truth without fear. After a long silence, she transformed into her werewolf form, but to her surprise, Fuji showed no fear at all. Turns out Fuji had known her secret all along. He promised to help her keep this secret. Meanwhile, Hana remained unconscious, but in her mind she found herself in a field of flowers. Her husband appeared there as well. After all this time apart, they embraced each other with deep longing. In that moment, Hana felt pure happiness. But when her husband brought up the children, she suddenly remembered Rain was still missing. Her husband reassured her that Rain would be fine, because he had already grown up. Unlike Snow, Rain had chosen to return to nature. He gently carried Hana down the mountain, then turned and walked away without looking back. Hana woke up and called out to her son with all her strength, but Rain had already transformed into his wolf form. He looked back at Hana one last time, then ran confidently toward the mountaintop. At the summit, he let out a powerful howl. At that very moment, the sun began to rise, casting light over the misty forest. Though Hana's eyes were filled with tears, her heart was filled with pride, because she supported every choice her children made. Many years passed in the blink of an eye. Snow smoothly transitioned into middle school, but Hana still loved living in that remote old house. Every now and then, she would gaze at the photo of her late husband. She felt completely at peace. She enjoyed the mountain breeze that drifted through the window. and listened to the howls of wolves echoing from the forest. It was everything she had always hoped for. Whenever Hannah looked back on the past decade or so, her face would light up with a warm, happy smile. It had been tough, but every bit of it was worth it. She had taken on the responsibilities of two people, protecting her children's smiles through wind and rain. She wasn't just a single mother. She was a hero, unstoppable in the eyes of her children.